Um, I will talk on,
Now, okay, I'm not gonna talk real loud. Maybe you turn it down a little bit? Because if I talk like this, I'm not projecting.
But I like the
So
deep.
anyway.
He's got me a lot of bass, so it sounds nice and deep.
This all started probably about 20 years ago when we tripled the size of our house. And my friend said, "When are you gonna redo your fish room?" I said, someday. And then the pandemic hit, and I thought, what a great time. We split our shifts at work, so I worked at 5 till noon, and I had all the rest of the day. So I go, what the hell? I'm gonna go to the city, give them my plan, and well, the rest is history. So, what do you want to do what are you trying to accomplish when you're building a fish room? If you have a lot of little tanks, you probably want to put them together, maybe get a better variety of fish, maybe organization efficiency to make things flow a little smoother. I'm kind of nitpicky aesthetics. I like all my tanks one straight line, so that's one consideration. You get more efficient, you get better efficiency, feeds into breeding more fish, different kinds of fish, and then, well, energy savings. You can pool together all your little pumps and stuff and make it a whole lot easier. Yeah, all of the above. You want to accomplish that. So there's a lot of things to consider, and you're always thinking about this kind of stuff. What kind of plants and fish, or you're going to keep only plants or only fish, and how do you want to combine them, and how do you want to display them, and what kind of a breeding setup do you want? And then if you have a family, well, obviously, old fish keepers go on to do other things, and sometimes eventually go away. You need new fish keepers coming up, so you get the family involved, and sometimes you delegate authority or delegate the responsibilities to the younger people, and they really like that. And then it takes a lot of responsibility off of you, so you have more time to do things that you want to do. Let the kids do the fish room work. What do you want? What do you have to work with as far as spatial capabilities? If you have a really tiny fish room, then you got to make the most of what you have. If the wife or whoever you're living with decides that you can have the whole basement, well, then knock yourself out. You have a lot of opportunity. How big are your tanks going to be? I went from, I had a couple of 6-foot tanks and a lot of smaller tanks, 40s and a lot of 20s, and now my current fish room is a lot of big tanks. How big your tank size is going to be? And a lot of it is motivated by budget. How much money do you have to spend? If you've got a limited budget, you can do this in steps and add on as you have the money to add on. And if you are really serious as a working person in your younger years, you can develop or devote a lot of time to this. When I was in my foolish years in the 90s, I had over 200 tanks in my basement, and I would work an 8-hour, 10-hour shift, and then I would come home and work another 4 to 6 to 8 hours every single day in my fish room. My wife says I'm insane. That was therapy. And that's when I did all the majority of my fish breeding back in the 90s. And then you get to the big things that, okay, do you have the electrical capacity? Do you have a 60 amp service with fuses, or do you have a 100 amp service with breakers, or do you have a 200 amp service? It's going to always be upgraded, but that costs money. What's the availability of plumbing? Do you have to run new lines for drains? Do you have to run new lines for supplies? What kind of water do you have? And then it gets to the nitpicky stuff, like the city really likes to see anything over $500 investment in your house. They want to see a plan, so you got to play that game. And then the skill set. Are you able to do it yourself? Are you going to hire it out? It gets back to money. Hire somebody else to do it. It can get expensive. So that being said, again, you go into the big things about what do you want to put on the floor. I learned the hard way back in the 90s. This does not work for a fish room. I don't care how careful you are going to get water on the floor. Period. So after, how many years was it? Was it even 5 years? It was 4 or 5 years. I tore up my entire fish room, moved, and this is when I had tanks on either side, and my fish room is about 12 by 28 feet long. So I tore up all the floor and moved the fish to the middle of the floor, and then I started tiling, and then I moved them back, and it was a several week process. And then I got tile on my floor. Then I had kind of a new fish room, but it wasn't really new, I just moved everything around. Why do it twice when you could think enough the first time? You want to do it right, or you want to do it over? And over, and over, until you think you got it right, and you still say, I could have done one more thing, just a bit different. But for the most part, it works better than it started out with. And the ceiling, that's kind of a personal thing. Do you want to keep the ceiling as it is? Do you want to upgrade the ceiling? Do you want to insulate above the ceiling? I thought it would be really cool in my new fish room to put recessed lighting in, because I have a ceiling that's about 80 inches. So for tall people, that kind of sucks. And if you want big tanks, that even sucks more, because you're limited to your vertical expansion. So if you want to do a suspended ceiling and you have a 10-foot ceiling, great, but I don't know too many people that have a 10-foot ceiling in their basement. The racks and stands, what do you want to make it out of? Wood is the easiest choice. Some people like to go metal. Steel rusts, aluminum, at today's prices. Are you crazy? And I know some people that have built entire fish rooms out of plastic racking, and it works just fine. It's structurally safe. You got to find the right tanks to make the space of what there is on those available plastic racks, but that works well. It's never going to rust. I don't know if anybody has been around long enough to see how brittle that plastic gets over a period of time, so it's probably not going to break for a long time, not in our lifetime at least. Insulation and humidity control, that's a big thing that a lot of people fail to realize, how much humidity can be in a fish room, and there's several ways of mitigating that. One is an air exchanger, which is an easy option. The easiest option, actually, without spending a whole lot of money, is just putting a tight lid on your tanks. And if you keep killifish or any fish that like to do the airborne ranger trick, you learn really quick that you seal your tanks as best as possible, and that goes a long, long way of keeping the humidity probably 40-50% in your house year round. And having aquariums in the house is a good thing to eliminate the static electricity and the overall dryness. Heating and air conditioning goes kind of hand in hand with the heated room and the heated tanks. How do you want to heat the fish room? Do you want a zone? Do you want it, how do you want to control it? Do you want a really warm fish room? Do you want a cool fish room? Doesn't it really matter? It's just as good as the rest of the, you're going to heat the room as well as you're going to heat the rest of the house with no modifications and do traditional just heat each tank? Or do you want to heat the room itself? And then you can go down the road as how do you want to do that? Do you want to redesign it so you've got in-floor heating? You want overhead radiant heat? Do you want forced air? Do you want radiant oil-filled heater, silly stuff like that? I mean, the possibilities are endless. But again, if you want to do it right the first time, explore your possibilities of how you're going to do it, either versus heating the room and how you're going to heat that room. Aquarium air system, that's pretty much cut and dried. I don't think, if you're going to spend this kind of money on putting a new fish room in, just get a system, and I'll show you what I've done. One pump controls everything, one and done. You don't have to worry about bleeding air off of this one and having how many fill or pumps going, and balancing everything so every tank has a little bit of air because your pump just isn't quite big enough, or you don't have enough of them. Power supplies is really important, because you find out that if you put too many tanks that you think are going to fit on the 15 amp circuit, they're always going to be popping, especially in the wintertime. I haven't had that problem ever because I have everything on a 20 amp circuit. You want to divide it up into room lighting versus the tank lighting versus your power supply for everything else that your heaters and your pumps and your filters. I don't really have a lot. I have the ability, I've learned in the past, I have the ability with electrical outlets for both air, or for both air pumps, water pumps, auxiliary, whatever, and then just the lighting circuit, which is on a timer. I planned for a 20 amp circuit and never had a problem. What's the next? Okay, create a floor plan. How do you want it to look like? I've had mine for years and years and years, and never actually thought that would come to fruition until the pandemic kind of forced my hand. Made it crystal clear, this is the time to do it, because I have a lot of money now, and I have a lot of time, and what the hell, let's get her done. So, make a plan. As you'll see in the next slide, I believe it is, I have everything scaled up. You can move it around, go crazy, have it on a magnetic board, put it up on the wall, and just make it work. Just what you think is the best. Again, build out the sequencing. If you're going to do it all at once, you got the money for it, go for it. If you're going to do it a little bit at a time, or you really don't know yet, okay, I'm going to build this because I know this is what I want. Am I going to do a Pistos or am I going to do Oscars? Well, are you going to put big tanks in the next section or whatever? I just, just think things out. What are you going to need to make this not only of your new fish room, but also in the tools that you're going to need if you are going to do it yourself, having that skill set, costing out all the components, and to minimize the surprises, thoroughly investigate your options and price them out, and you're going to be pleasantly surprised. You won't have any surprises because you know exactly what things are going to cost. And if you think it's not going to cost that much, think again. If it's going to cost more, it probably will. 25% is probably better than 10% because you're not going to have a surprise at 25% versus, well, it's not going to cost more than 10%. Well, if you're on a strict budget, then you're going to have to steal from one to give another if that's what has to be done. This is something that a lot of people don't really think about, but proof you're playing with other people. Hey, what do you think of this? You think I should do this or should I do this? What did you do in your fish room, or how do you do it? And bounce it off other people, because I honestly can't say that I've had any flack from anybody saying, well, I'm jealous of your fish room. Well, you don't have to do the work in my big frickin' fish room either, so don't be jealous of me. But I've never had anybody coming back and say, well, I don't like what you're doing. Well, I don't care what you think, because it's not your fish room. Everybody seems like they're always excited for you or what you're going to do. And it always seems to literally spawn ideas in other people's heads when you bounce these ideas off. It's like you've got an aquarium society, a literal think tank of other aquarists that everybody can feed off of. And most everybody is willing to put in input to that pool. Again, if you don't have the skill set, connect with the appropriate contractors and the helpers, whether it be neighbors or friends. Make sure they're qualified, because some of this stuff, you only want to do it once. And if you have someone that, well, I know a guy, you know that story, and then it ends up being a total show, well, yeah, it's something you wish you would have done right the first time in finding the correct people for the job. And this is one thing that I am probably the biggest violator of. I never set a timetable. I never set that end goal. And so I don't know if this kind of pushed it, but I knew that I was almost done. I did most of it in the first year. I did a lot of it last year, but when I was transferring over from my old fish room, which you see in the upcoming pictures, to my new fish room, there was a lot of little things. You don't realize the itty-bitty, tiny, stupid things that you have to do if you want to do it right, and then not have to do it over again sometime in the future. Well, I'll get to that. Well, it never usually ever gets done, so do it now. For instance, if I am taking bare tanks and I want to paint them, that takes time. Well, it's cold outside and I don't want to paint in the house, and I want to wait till it warms up. Or you always have some excuse you can't do it, but there's always some stupid little thing that has to fall in order chronologically for the next step to happen. So I didn't really finalize any kind of a timetable, but I knew I was close, so I said, let's button it up, but say you do have a goal, make it happen and try to stick to it. Stick to the plan, work the plan. Here is a slide from one of my older presentations, and I did this all to scale, but it has changed a little bit in the left side. That has changed into a bank of blue acrylic tanks that many of you will recognize from fish stores in town here, and a couple 40 breeders underneath. But everything else, with the exception of the 20 highs under the 75s, they all turned into 75s under the 75s. So in the end is my show tank, my 180, and then I have 40 breeders under those, and then 125, 75, and my short wall of big tanks. And then on the other side is my long wall of, well, some people think 75s are big tanks. Bottom line, start your project, get it going. That was the biggest thing for me. I could just never, as most people, it's making the choice takes forever. Flipping the switch takes an instant. So once you're ready, now's as good a time as any. You know, you think you got your plan, start the plan, follow it, work it, and there's always going to be surprises no matter how much you plan. There's always going to be issues, either with contractors or physical issues, or now we have this thing called supply line issues, supply chain issues, yeah, that too. And make sure you keep it fun, because this is a hobby. Unless you're building a business, then you still got to keep it fun. But just keep it moving, and then when it's all said and done, enjoy your setup, because isn't that kind of what you started this for anyway? Well, one time I used to have a fish room that looked like this. Okay.
That looks nice.
And then it kind of looked like this when I decided to flip the switch and start my new fish room. So I chose not to do a panoramic, so I took 2 pictures. You can kind of figure out what's going on there. But on the left side was what you saw of the previous, only the fish that I have in the big tanks now, they were growing and growing and growing. And for those of you who know Bob Randall, the big fish I have, I got from Bob Randall through the BAT program when they were about that big, and now they're about yay big. So that's what I have now. And I think I have another one. This is what I'm kind of currently working on. You know where those tanks are from, PetSmart, Petco, you've seen them. I don't know how they decided to spend so much money on acrylic, maybe it was a corporate brain fart, and all of a sudden all this wonderful acrylic ends up in somebody else's fish room and not a fish store. But since there's not so many fish stores around anymore, I'm guessing that's why. But I've had these for I don't know how long, and they kept on coming through the MAS auction, so I figured someday I'm going to put this as some kind of a sidebar in my fish room. And I have 4, I only need 3. Put a couple 40 breeders below. I might put them in the system, I might not, but that's kind of the end of it. And as Porky would say, that's all I've got. And I'm sure nobody's got